Hello, and welcome to the Badger Talks podcast, the podcast that shares interviews with experts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison community about their work, research, and a little bit about what they're like as people, too. I'm your host, Buzz Kemper. Today, we'll be talking about the West Madison Agricultural Research Station with my guests, Janet Hedtcke, Superintendent of the Research Station, and UW Plant and Agroeconomics Professor William Tracy. Janet and Bill, thanks so much for coming in and talking to us about this. I was completely unfamiliar with this research station, and so I looked it up, and the list of things are really fascinating. Agronomy research, biological systems engineering, entomology, genetics, horticulture, plant pathology. There's a lot going on there. Can you, one or both of you, give us kind of a general overview of what the research station is and what its purpose is?
I'll start. Thank you. So the Ag Research Stations are a network of stations across the state within the College of Ag and Life Sciences to help with provide a land base for research, faculty to come and use the land to do applied research, part of the Wisconsin Experimental Station. And so West Madison is the closest one to the campus. So that's why we have such a diversity of users, because it's really a gem of land-based green space for this field research that these faculty can take their studies out and try them out in the real world.
Okay. So there are several of these stations located throughout the state?
Yes.
How many?
A dozen, 12.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, terrific. So the West Madison is just one of 12. Okay. Good to know. And Bill?
Yeah, I'll just focus. Janet's absolutely right. Of course, we have 12 stations, and they're scattered around based on soil type and climate and everything. So we get an idea of not an idea. We get the chance to do research in the southwestern part of the state where there's a lot of cattle grazing, up in Door County where there's fruit growing. So it really depends. So that's why the 12 are scattered around. The one at West Madison, however, as Janet said, is the closest, and there's a lot of stuff going on around there, and we can certainly talk more about those things. But the key thing is, because of its convenience to campus, a lot of students, graduate students and undergraduates, are trained there. We, in my own program, I have right now 9 grad students, and usually in the summertime, maybe 10, 13, 15 undergrads, which if we were even 20 miles further out, that would be expensive transporting all those people.
So how does this work in practicality? Do you have students and professors who each have a piece of this, and one says, well, I'm studying what's happening to, pests affecting corn, and someone else says, well, I'm just studying bugs that affect this other thing. How does this actually work?
Yeah, if I can take that, Janet, because I'm going to give Janet some credit here. So what are we, 550 acres, 600 acres, something like that? And so picture a big puzzle board, or what's going to become a puzzle. And how many people we have research programs out there in an average year?
About 35.
So 35 faculty go to Janet and say, we need this much room.
Okay.
Somebody might say, we only need a quarter of an acre. But most people say we need 10 or 20 or 30 acres. And it's up to Janet to rotate all of those demands and find the place they can be. Because then on top of that, we have to impose crop rotation. We don't want to grow the same crop on the same ground every year. So Janet has to take all of that into account and come up with the best arrangement. And it would really actually work out as a puzzle, because some years I'm over in this part of the farm, and other years I'm over in another part of the farm, just to accommodate both the demands of everybody, but also the demands of the soil, let's say, for rotation.
Okay. And Bill, what is your relationship to the station, are you doing your own study there, or are you teaching about just a lot of what goes on there? What as a professor, what is your relationship to the station?
My main role there is actually, I am a sweet corn breeder. That's what I do. I develop new varieties of sweet corn, and I teach students. So in essence, I'm doing research on sweet corn breeding, not only just developing new varieties, but also looking for disease resistance, insect resistance. We're trying to look at making sweet corn more competitive with weeds, all of those to reduce chemical usage. My biggest concern is making sure it tastes good. So we do a lot of taste testing.
Well, thank you for that.
But you mentioned teaching. All of that, and this is the Wisconsin model, the graduate model, is at the same time, I mentioned 9 graduate students. At the same time, the graduate students are all out in the field in the summertime. They all have field projects, and they're learning about how to become a plant breeder, or how to become an agronomist, or how to become an agroecologist. So teaching is definitely part of almost everybody's mission out there. And then we also have the undergrads, and a lot of those undergrads we try to entice, let's say, into a career in agriculture. So there's a lot of teaching going. It's really integrated, teaching and research. Okay. I would say that's almost true for all of the programs out there.
Okay, and picking up on that, it's teaching and research. Janet, what is the delineation right now between how much of this land is being used by professors, researchers, as opposed to students? And I'd love to know about some of the stuff that is going on there, is being researched, and what we're finding. I feel like I just asked you 15 questions, but let's start with just the sort of allocation of land. How does that work, and how do you make those decisions?
So it's complicated. There's horticultural crops don't mesh well with agronomic to rotate because of the different herbicide tolerance and size of land needed. So
okay.
I've got...
Can you give us a couple examples of both those categories, just
Sure.
so that people can
for example, the
understand?
horticultural research includes mostly food crops, vegetables, and ornamentals, specialty crops, like cold-hardy grapes or carrots, for example. A lot of that the research is for either variety trials to compare or testing new genetics.
Okay.
And developing new genetics. And horticulture is often in square feet versus acres because it's so labor intensive. It's all mostly manual harvest, touching every plant, be it a honeyberry bush or a hazelnut tree, one by one. There's no mechanization for the most part.
Okay.
And so the biosystems engineers are trying to improve efficiency in those kind of crops with mechanization.
Okay.
So that's some of their research, is prototype testing machinery for making it more doable, because there's a lot of people concentrated in one small area to get the crop managed from transplanting to harvest. And often with vegetables, it's day after day of harvest. It's not one at the end of the year. For example, tomatoes, it's every other day for 3 months.
Yeah, right.
One fruit at a time.
Right. We all know that when all of our friends say, "Do you want some tomatoes? I've got 6,000 of them." Yeah.
Or zucchini.
Or zucchini. Yes.
With the agronomic crops, which is a lot of field corn, sweet corn, small grains like wheat and barley and oats, there's a lot of breeding going on in that, both under conventional or organic systems. So we have land for both situations. And they need the rotation because most of those grass crops need a lot of nitrogen, and ideally coming in after an alfalfa plow down where you're getting a lot of nitrogen for free from the plant. But also one of the research that is indirectly used is on campus is the livestock. The livestock has a dairy and animals on campus that they milk the cows, and they have different research going on in the barn, and we're providing the feed for them because there's no room on campus to store or grow that kind of feed. And then we're bringing the manure back to compost it so that it's neutral, odor neutral, and a very nice soil amendment that's safe for food crops. So we have a composting operation because we're right up against neighbors all around the station, and so to land apply it or the smell won't offend everybody.
Okay. Does the West Station, does it have animals, or are those kept elsewhere?
No animals. We just take care of them.
You just grow, feed for the animals and do research on that. And how did you get into this? Because you grew up on a dairy farm,
right?
And so somehow this led to you being the superintendent of this this research station. So give us a sense of that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I knew I didn't want to milk cows all my life, and that's why I went on for advanced degree in. But I knew Wisconsin's economy was around dairy, and so I learned a lot in growing up, and then the skills and technical skills from college, and then I managed a cropping system trial for over a dozen years up at the sister station at Arlington. But the opportunity came up to apply for the assistant superintendent out at the West-Madison, which involved all this horticulture that I really learned on the fly because it's such a wide range from, again, potatoes to flowers to grapes and annual crops. And it took a while to get all that figured out. And so then it's just my style of growing up on a farm. You just live it. And like it's fun because it's diverse and you learn. Eventually it all comes into place, and you kind of can learn a lot all at once, it seems. But there's always a lot to learn, and that's fun, too.
Yeah, I bet. So it's more fun than milking cows every day. I bet. And what can you give me an example? And I want to get back to sweet corn in a minute with you, Bill. But Janet, what give us an example or two of some of the interesting bits of research that and knowledge that has come out of this research station. What kind of things are being looked at, and what kind of interesting discoveries being made?
So, for example, being in a northerly climate relative to the rest of the country, we discovered there are some seedless table grapes that can overwinter and have really good flavor, and you can grow them in your own backyard or grow enough to sell at your farmer's market, for example. And so some of the research was discovering which ones survive and which varieties are really easy ones to grow, low disease pressure or high resistance, I should say.
Well, if I could jump in.
Yeah, please.
Some of the folks who work on organic vegetable production, they found that there are varieties of heirloom tomatoes that are better than modern tomatoes. There's always that debate about which are the best. And some of the some of the heirloom types really do very well and are very competitive with conventional, or let's say new varieties that are being produced by companies now. And I would also say they also do a lot of work in what we call hoop houses, which are basically unheated greenhouses. And they're looking at, they're finding that hoop houses, we already know that they extend the season. Obviously, you can start growing in there earlier and you can harvest later, but they're finding that there's a lot of advantage in terms of preventing diseases simply by growing them under the cover and not having rainfall on the leaves.
What qualifies any vegetable as heirloom as opposed to contemporary or modern?
I knew I shouldn't have used that word. An heirloom variety is an heirloom variety is one that usually has been passed from family member to family member or farmer to farmer, and they have come to us in that way rather than a seed company developing a new variety, and that would be what I'm calling a conventional variety or a new variety. So heirlooms, basically, I think the idea of passing them between neighbors even, I mean, any way that you could, but just not through the, shall we say, conventional seed business system, which they make very good tomatoes too. But we found that, not me, but another group of folks found that some of the heirlooms are actually better than some of the conventional varieties.
And better in what?
Flavor.
Flavor? Okay.
Flavor, but also...
Terrific. Okay.
Also, they're better, well, they're equal, let's say, in terms of productivity. That's the other question is, we need both things. We need high quality, good flavor, that kind of thing, but we also need for the farmer to be able to grow enough in such a way that they're going to make a living.
Right. Yeah. And this is another thing I want to get into. And geez, I feel like I could ask 100 more questions, but what are all the, I mean, it's probably impossible to list them all, but it seems to me you've got so many factors that are in play here. How does it taste? How robust is it? How resistant to pests is it? Are all these things, is it, what is involved in this kind of research? Is it possible to keep breeding plants in such a way that they can improve in all these ways, or is it kind of a trade-off where you have to give up one to get another?
Well, I would say it's a compromise.
Okay, a compromise.
And it may take years to get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a compromise. Well, I'll give you an example with sweet corn.
Yeah.
And that is that, so we are looking for high quality sweet corn, relatively high in sugar. I know some people think it's sometimes too sweet, but most people are looking for that high level of sweetness, and also very tender. The first thing when you bite an ear of sweet corn, the first sensation you get is tenderness, how hard it is to bite through those kernels. Mm-hmm. So tenderness comes from how thick the outer skin of the sweet corn kernel is. Mm-hmm. Scientifically, that's called the pericarp. Some people call it the hull, but it's that outer layer. And so I've developed some lines that are extraordinarily thin, and very, very tender, but they split, and the seed is not viable.
Okay.
So that's a compromise. We have to find the thinnest one that will actually have viable seeds.
Yeah, where's that bar of,
yeah.
Okay.
Where's that compromise?
Yeah, right.
And we can get some things tender enough that we don't really have to go all that other way. But my point is that every breeding effort has some kind of compromise like that.
Okay.
If you want something that's very disease resistant or very cold tolerant, it might not be quite as good as something that's less cold tolerant.
Okay.
And that's one thing I want to actually add about the importance of these stations is we have a small grains breeder. She works on oats, wheat, barley, and we really need these stations scattered around the state because something that survives here in Madison might not survive up at Spooner, Wisconsin, because obviously the winters are colder and longer. Mm-hmm. So that's what these stations are for, is to actually test varieties. I think initially that's what probably was the main thing in mind, testing varieties all over the state. Mm-hmm. Now we have advanced to all sorts of kinds of research.
Okay.
But that testing all over the state is really critical.
Right, and the geographical part of this is also kind of fascinating to me because we're going through climate change. So are you finding that we are now growing plants that used to only be found maybe 200 miles south of us, or is there a climate aspect to all of this?
I think a lot of the research is based around climate change and resilience, and they're trying to produce crops that can handle these swings in weather, the intensity rainfall, or this year the constant wet soil.
Yeah.
And so that a lot of when the faculty write their grants to bring in their money for the research, it's that's one of the objectives, is to test is it ready for the new climate that we're living in?
Right, and will be living.
And hotter and humid, and more disease likes that hot, humid, and so those pressures are moving in, and so they're trying to breed more resistance into that.
Okay.
Those crops.
Some of the varieties that perhaps, let's say, were developed at the University of Illinois down in Champaign, traditionally wouldn't survive here over winter. They wouldn't survive the winter.
Right.
And now we're seeing some of those kinds of things survive. In my crop, sweet corn, which is obvious, well, maybe not obvious to anyone, it's an annual. It dies at the end of the summer. So we don't worry about overwintering. But what I've seen, and I've been here 40 years, but what I've seen in the last 5-10 years is that the pest complex has changed. Diseases that used to be bad are no longer as bad, and diseases that we didn't even have before, now we have.
Yeah.
It's not just the variety that's changing, or the crop variety, it's the pests.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think that would be a big factor and becoming more so. Wow. Just it's just amazing. I mean, what is being done at this research station and all the research stations is just basically, it seems like it's making sure that we all have food now and in the future. So thank you for that. And is there anything that either of you would like to say about the research station that perhaps I haven't asked the right question to get to?
I would just say that they all offer opportunities to visit or attend a field day to learn
Great.
educationally some of the data that the researchers are presenting. At West Madison, we have a beautiful display garden right along Mineral Point Road, so it's a public to showcase, kind of get into the door of these ag research stations and talk to us what's happening there.
Yeah.
And it's, again, a beautiful location with the garden and the varieties of flowers that are on display, the new cultivars, so homeowners can see firsthand what would they like in their yard, that this is what it's going to look like. So It's like a living lab that the public is welcome to visit, particularly on field days when we have an organized event to give data and analysis of the different projects.
Okay. Does one make a reservation to do this, or can they just show up, or how do people do that?
Most of the time there's scheduled outreach events, but at West Madison, the public display garden is open all the time, and so they can just come visit. We also provide guided tours, or the garden you can self-guide yourself, but we do provide guided tours if people reach out. And
and they can contact you probably through the website.
Yep, that's
West Madison ARS,
which is short for Agricultural Research Station.
at wisc.edu.
Yep.
Terrific. Okay, so if you have other questions, listeners, go there. Bill, anything else to add?
Well, I do want to give Janet tremendous credit for the display garden, and that 500 acres of puzzle, or 600 that she's managing. She's also managing this really, really beautiful garden. It's a very peaceful place. Doesn't get much traffic. I mean, meaning people coming, but it's a nice place to just sit and visit. One thing as a homeowner, there are, in addition to all of these beautiful annual crops, and an annual crop is one that dies at the end of the growing season, there are perennial crops out there like peonies, daylilies, some roses.
No roses anymore. Hydrangeas.
And you can go there and see which ones survive the winter. Okay. So if they grow year after year, if peonies grow year after year there, if you're in the Madison area, they'll probably grow well at your area. And I just would say that a lot of this work goes on throughout the state. And as you said, it's really making sure our food supply in the future, let's say, has been tested. It's not only been tested, it's been developed, but then also tested around the state to make sure that it survives in a way that the farmers and gardeners can make money or get a great product.
Terrific. All right. Well, as a vegetarian, I am benefiting directly from all of this research. Quick question to at the end. I mentioned earlier my hobby of rock climbing. You both seem like pretty busy people, but do you have hobbies, things you like to do in your spare time, or do you have spare time? Bill, I'll start with you.
I'm a big reader.
Okay.
But I love my work. Often when I tell people I'm traveling, or you could even say when I go to West Madison, people will often say business or pleasure. And I say both.
Both.
For me, what I do is my pleasure.
Terrific. Yeah, well, I'm lucky in that I really enjoy my work as well. Janet, how about you?
I too would really enjoy the work, but when I'm off work, I enjoy hiking and swimming at the state parks.
Oh, great. Okay.
Devil's Lake is one of my favorites, and
Okay.
just being outside.
Maybe I'll run into you at Devil's Lake. It's a great place. I swim there too, and one of the things I do sometimes is, if I'm feeling ambitious, is I'll swim across and back, and if you, because it's kind of a kidney-shaped lake, you can go, pretty short. It's about maybe a little over a half mile each way, or you can start putting an angle on it and make it more like 3/4 of a mile or a mile. And the fact that there are no motorboats, I just feel so safe. And one friend of mine asked me if I ever worry about getting hit by a boat. And I said, well, no, the only thing that could hit me would be a kayak. And 2 weeks later, I actually got hit by a kayak. I was swimming along, I was just, you turn to the side to breathe. So if somebody's coming at you from the other side, and I'm pretty sure the guy was stoned, because his kayak hit me in the head. It wasn't bad. And then he's like, "Oh, dude, sorry, man." It was pretty funny, but
Glad you weren't hurt.
I was not hurt. No, not at all. Just surprised. Thank you both, Bill, Janet. This has been really enlightening, and I knew very little about this research station and how important this work is, and it's really good to learn more about it. And thank you both for doing this.
Happy to do it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
You've been listening to the Badger Talks podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Janet Hedtcke and Professor William Tracy. Please browse our previous episodes for other topics that may be of interest to you. The Badger Talks podcast is a creation of UW Connects and produced at Audio for the Arts Recording Studio in Madison, Wisconsin. Our music is composed by Bill Purdy and performed by the UW Marching Band. I'm Buzz Kemper. Thank you for listening.